Team is probably one of the things that overwhelms people the most when they think about business growth, whether you already have a team and you feel like they're not as profitable or effective or efficient as they could be, or you don't have a team yet and you're worried about the idea of hiring and managing a team and all of the potential cash flow issues that might come with it. So in this video today, I'm going to walk you through what I think is the most important concept that you as a business owner need to understand in order to make sure that your team is lean, profitable, and actually supports your business growth. So I run a virtual CFO firm that provides advisory and strategic support for multi-6, 7, multi-7-figure business owners in these service-based industries. I've seen a trend over the last 6 to 12 months or so with many business owners that we work with who are downsizing their teams, and I actually have done the same. So I went back to this time a year ago, so early in Q1 2024, compared to my current team expenses that I have, and I have cut my team expenses in the last year by about 25% per month, which adds up to over $100,000 per year. And this is something that we have seen with the most recent CFO clients that we took on in our agency business, where basically everyone, we have been talking them through how to optimize and right-size their team because it is the number one thing causing profitability issues for their businesses. So I thought this episode might be helpful if you are also thinking about your profitability and your team. But before I jump into the topic of this video, I do want to remind you that if you need help assessing your business's profitability, if you think that your team might be driving your profitability issues, book a free one-on-one financial health assessment where you will upload your financial statements. I will take a look at them and I will help you benchmark and assess your profitability and identify the issues that I'm seeing in your financial statements that might be leading to a lower or unoptimized level of profitability. So the link for that is in the description under this video. Here's the concept that I think all business owners need to understand if you have a team or are thinking about hiring one, and that concept is capacity and utilization. This is honestly something that we've worked with hundreds of business owners at this point, and I can think of maybe two business owners who came into working with me and my team who had this concept down. So I'm going to talk you through how to figure out what your capacity is and how to assess your utilization and what to do about it if you think you might need to downsize or if you think you're ready to hire more team members. So honestly, I really think that not understanding capacity and utilization leads in most cases to business owners overhiring. And overhiring, meaning you hire more team than you actually have work for, which drives your profitability down, which drains your cash flow because every time you have to run payroll, it's costing you thousands or tens of thousands or more, hundreds of thousands of dollars every time you run payroll. A lot of times I think business owners, you just get so busy, and we see a lot of business owners who don't necessarily dig into their metrics, or they don't have an accounting team that supports them being able to calculate their metrics around team capacity and utilization. And so what ends up happening is you might hire based on what feels urgent at the time versus what the business actually needs, what's in line with your overall strategy. I honestly, y'all, I find that it is very rare for a team to say that they're underworked. I think that the feedback that I get from my team and that most of my clients get from their team is that they feel like they're busy. So you can't necessarily, I'm going to tell you, you can't necessarily go off of what your team is telling you. And I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to them because you absolutely should. But I think that the law, I think it's called Parkinson's law, that says that the work you have expands to fill the time that is available. And so I find that this happens a lot with team members where no matter how much, up to a point, the amount of work that you give to the team is going to take up the same amount of time. And so I think that's where it's really important to make sure that you are calculating budgets for what you think your team capacity is so that you can assign them a workload that is reasonable, that is going to help you both hit your profitability goals, but also not cause your team to be overworked and burned out. Let's talk through what capacity and utilization actually is so that you can go and figure out what your team's current capacity and utilization is in your business and help you make better decisions about what to do with your team. So capacity is basically the amount of work that your team can handle in a given time frame. So if you think about your team, how much time are you paying them for, whether it's full-time or part-time? but within the time that you are employing them, how much work can they reasonably get done? So we typically work with agencies or with appointment-based businesses like health and wellness spaces, think chiropractors, therapists, people like that, right? People that have appointment-based slots. Or the agencies, this is typically like B2B type businesses where you have either project or retainer-based offers. And so when I think about calculating team capacity, it really depends on which type of business model you have. So I'm going to talk about both of these. So if you have a project or retainer-based business, then what I think we need to do to figure out your team's capacity is to sit down and create a budget for the tasks that your team is doing. That means you're going to sit down, and whether you have a project or a retainer, you're going to ask yourself, what are the deliverables that we're doing for our clients, and what are the tasks that are needed to provide those deliverables, and almost just sit down and create a timeline for the project or for the retainer, and then creating a budget based on either how much time you think it should take to do that particular task, or based on if your team tracks time, based on the actual amount of time that it takes on average for them to do that task. So to calculate a team capacity, let's say you have a full-time person who's 40 hours a week and you assign a set number of tasks to them, you would say, okay, within that 40 hours, I would expect for them to be able to reasonably accomplish X, Y, and Z. I will say that for a full-time team member, I never calculate 100% of their time as being billable or productive or revenue generating, because you have to bake in admin time, emails, team meetings, etc. You also need to factor in things like time off. Like, we're not going to assume 100% of their time is billable or productive time. If you have a part-time employee or even a contractor, I would say with a contractor, I would expect 100% of the time that they're billing to be productive or revenue generating. But if you have a part-time employee, you might also want to factor in some admin or time off as well. But basically, you're going to sit down and say, okay, within this week or within a month, they're going to have approximately this much time available to work, and creating a budget for the tasks that they're going to be able to do. And from there, you can back into saying, okay, this is how many clients this one team member can support. I will say that most agency businesses that we work with don't have their team track time. I'd say some do, but many agency style businesses don't. Nobody ever likes it when I say this, but I actually think it's really important for this type of business to have your team track their time, because otherwise you really don't have great insight into how long it actually takes for specific things to get done. What I like to do is either have your team track time, or if you really are going to push back, if they're going to push back hard on tracking time, then what you can also do is use your capacity model to calculate a revenue target to say, okay, within this time that they have, we should be generating this much in terms of revenue based on the tasks that are done. And so you can also track revenue per employee to make sure that you're hitting a target number per person. And if you need help doing this, my pricing tool actually will help you break it down. If you go and download in the link in the description, my sales plan and pricing tool, you can input the time that you're paying your team for to do the work, and out will come a revenue number that you need to hit in order to hit a, nice solid gross profit number. So if you are, on the other hand, an appointment-based business, what I like for my clients to do is to go through and figure out, based on how much time you're open and how many available appointments you have each day that you're open, to ask yourself, what would be the max number of appointments that we could feasibly fit in a given day or in a given week? I typically see it done on a weekly basis, because most people's hours are not exactly the same every single day of the week. So you calculate your appointments that you would have available for the week. That would be a max number. Again, you're never going to hit reasonably 100% of available appointments, because you need to make sure that you're baking in time for your team to have admin time. Maybe they have to do setup or paperwork in between appointments. Maybe they have to drive from one place to another. Maybe you just also want to factor in some time off and holidays, but you're not going to say they're going to be 100% productive all the time, because that's just not reasonable. And so what I like to target is generally 75 to 85% in terms of productive hours out of the total available time during the day. So for appointment-based businesses, I made this note over here. You calculate your revenue goal. And so when we calculate a target capacity for an appointment-based business, we usually then will take that a step further and ask, okay, if we're hitting our target appointments every week, what is that in terms of revenue? And that's a nice metric that you can track. You can see, okay, we're hitting this number of appointments every week. That's X percent of the available capacity. Are we on track or off track to hitting our revenue goal? So step one, understand your capacity based on which of these business models you have. Once you've calculated your capacity, you're going to want to look at utilization. So utilization is how much or what percentage of your total capacity is being used for revenue generating or productive billable hours. So the way you calculate it is you calculate how much time your team spent in delivering appointments or in delivering work, which you would calculate based on a time tracker. Divide those hours by the total available capacity times 100 to get your percentage. And again, the target that I like to target for revenue facing or client facing team members is 75 to 85% of their total available time. So once you sit down and calculate your numbers, what does that actually mean in terms of what you can do next in your business? And to answer that, I'm going to give you a couple of recent client examples that I have. So one client example is an appointment-based business where they have a set number of appointment slots available each day. And when they came in, we saw immediately that their profit margins were super low, and we dug into it and saw that specifically gross profit margin was way under what our benchmark was for this industry. Digging into it and talking with the business owner, what we found is that out of the total appointments available in the given day, most of their clients wanted a set, like some of the appointments, and then the other ones in the off times were like half capacity for what they could do based on their current staffing. And what they had done was they hired enough full-time employees to staff their busiest appointment slots, which meant that the other appointment slots during the day, they had team members who were either not utilized at all, but they were being paid, or they were underutilized and only at about half capacity. So we went through and assessed the numbers and figured out there's about a 25 to 30% reduction in payroll costs that they needed to have if they were to scale their team back to the number of appointments that they currently had during the day. So when this situation happens, a lot of clients just want to say, oh, well, I'll just sell more and increase my revenue up, and that will fill up the available capacity. And I would say that's fine. But what we see happening in a lot of cases is that that's not necessarily something that you can snap your fingers and do overnight, especially when you have such a large gap in your utilization. And so what we ended up doing was we talked to the business owner and said, okay, either you need to take your clients and take the busy appointments and cap those and force people to start using some of the off times. And then you need to cut your staff back, because when the busy time has less people, you're going to not need as many employees to cover that. And so you're going to drop staff that way. Or what you need to do is go through and only having a full-time staff to staff the minimum appointments that you have, like to staff the lower times, the slower appointment slots, staff those with full-time people, and then hire part-timers to staff the appointment slots that you have more clients coming in. And what she ended up doing was kind of a combination of both. So she went through her staff and cut some of the people who were underperformers, who weren't really a great fit anyways, especially not for where she wanted to take her business. And then she ended up getting another couple of contracts that filled up some of the extra time. And so kind of like did a combination of both. An example from agencies, and actually this is similar to what happened in Young & Co. and as to why we've let go of 25% of our payroll since a year ago, is what we have seen a lot of in the last year or so is hiring for periods of growth. So a lot of agencies will see going through cycles of bringing on tons and tons of clients all at once, and everything's good and lead flow is good and conversions are good. And so they end up hiring for that really high period of growth. And then for one reason or another, either the CEO gets busy with that workload that comes with the large period of growth and they stop doing the marketing and lead gen activities, or we have a change in the economic cycle and clients are buying less or they spend less, right? So there's kind of a combination of both of those things that we saw happening over the last year. And hiring full-time employees, especially in agencies where, people are really like your primary asset. And I'm very much an advocate for paying people in agencies well and making sure that you're giving them good benefits and things, because in a lot of agencies you have to, I guess this goes for appointment-based businesses too, but I'd say especially with agencies with professionals that you're hiring, you have to compete with bigger businesses that can oftentimes offer these other benefits and incentives. And so we need to find a better balance, right? And so we found with a couple clients last year who have agency models that they had overhired for that period of growth, and then their revenue dropped off, and they then had to just downsize their team. Because again, when you have team that's on your payroll that's underutilized, you can either sell more or cut staff. And usually the fastest way to increase your cash flow is going to be to cut back on staff. We actually had a couple of clients who took their full-time team members and proposed that they switch to a part-time hourly model, and they were worried that their team members were gonna not be open to that, but in most cases they actually were pretty open to switching from full-time back to hourly. So ultimately, what I want you to do with this information, once you've figured out your team capacity and the current utilization you have, is to help you make decisions to align your team structure and the pay structure and everything with your overall business strategy and where you want to go. So using this data, you either need to say, okay, everything's good, we're on track, or we need to downsize our team, or we need to hire more because our team is at capacity. So just to kind of give you some flags for when you might want to do those things. If your overall profitability is low, so in last week's episode, I talked specifically about gross profit margin and how to calculate that. If you're finding that your gross profit margin is low, depending on the industry, definitely if it's 50% or less, that's low. For some businesses, your gross profit margin should be or could be 65 up to 80%. If your gross profit margin is lower than that though, or you're having cash flow issues, or you're finding that your team is just not fully at capacity, it's a sign that you need to downsize. On the other hand, if your team is consistently at, 85 to 90% capacity week after week, if your current members, if they're really stretched thin in their current roles, if their work quality has declined because they're doing too much and you can see them getting burned out, or you're turning away business because of a lack of capacity, then it's probably time to think about hiring. So when you're in this place, actually don't necessarily recommend you go out and hire another full-time person unless you know that you have the sales pipeline coming to support another full-time person. But what I would do is take the time to sit down and audit your current utilization, audit the current roles, and ask yourself if your team members really are fully utilized. Ask yourself if there's ways that you can streamline your delivery, if there's ways that you can make their work take less time, if you can automate in certain things, if you can drop off clients that are one-off type of things. You guys know, if you've been around for a while, you know that I'm really big on standardizing client delivery. So if you ask yourself if you can scale back on some of those one-offs and really focus on the clients that you get the best results for and the offers that are the most profitable, can you put their time onto those offers and therefore make more money with the same team? I think going through and thinking about those things first before hiring is definitely worth the week or so that you can probably spend thinking through it. And then I'm actually going to refer you back to episode 102 of the Profit and Prosper podcast, where I talked through how you can think about growth and hiring team in more of a fractional capacity when you're at capacity versus going straight for hiring another full-time person that you might not, 6 to 12 months down the road, you might not end up needing because you just had an unusually busy time period in your business. So your takeaways from today is going to be to sit down, and if you have not thought about what your team's capacity is or their utilization, sit down and think about it, and then ask yourself, where are you at in terms of the current utilization for the team that you have right now? This is something that is not just like a one and done thing. I think it's really important to figure out which metrics you need to use in terms of calculating your utilization and monitor those on a regular basis. I think especially if you are going to make changes to your team or potentially will make changes to your team based on the results of you assessing their capacity, I think it's really great to establish that as a team KPI and share that with them so that they know and so that they can clearly see their role in generating revenue and overall business sustainability. And if you need help in identifying whether your business is on track or off track, to what its profit margin should be, what some of the next steps you could take in order to improve cash flow, to grow your business more profitably and more sustainably, go to the link in the description and you can book a one-on-one financial health assessment with me where we'll talk through your next step to growing your business, your profits, and your wealth. All right, so that's it for today, y'all. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and I'll see you back next time.